It's draft day in the NFL, and who better to give us a perspective on what to expect than NFL super agent Leigh Steinberg? The movie Jerry MaGuire is based on his life. Show me the money! And Leigh Steinberg has shown the money to numerous NFL clients over the years, most notably recently, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's had ups and downs in his professional and personal life and has plenty to say about the draft and the journey.
Is this like, is draft day, what is it, like Christmas Day for you? How would you describe what the NFL draft's like for you?
Draft day is the most exciting day of the year. You have young players who have, since Pop Warner, aspired for this moment, and in most situations are surrounded by everybody meaningful to them, and the tension ratchets up. So draft time in between picks is not real time. It's like water torture time. Every second seems like a minute. Every minute seems like an hour. Drip, drip, drip. And then it leads to this static moment where total joy breaks out, notwithstanding the fact that the player might have been picked lower than he wants to go. At that exact moment, it's the fruition of all those years of practice and sacrifice, and I just love it.
What are your kind of top moments from draft day, whether it's the excitement, the gut-wrenching ones, the ones that just changed a young man's life?
Well, I remember back in 91, I had the first and second pick in the draft. So that was certainly exciting with Russell Maryland and Eric Turner. Troy Aikman's draft day, he had already signed a contract, but it was sort of honorary at that point. Drew Bledsoe's draft day, the Patriots were picking between two quarterbacks, and then when they picked him, it was massive excitement. Patrick Mahomes' draft day was filled with excitement because there was trading, and viewers are going to ask, what are they doing in between picks? They've had months to diagnose every possible combination of which player could be there, like for the Cardinals, which player will be there when their turn comes. What are they talking about? Well, they're dealing with trades, and teams that have a player that they particularly covet want to move up in the draft so they can still get him. And teams that don't particularly love the player for the position want to trade down in the draft. So that's what the 10 minutes are doing. There was a year with Ben Roethlisberger where he had been told by the New York Giants they might take him if a trade didn't occur between Manning and the Chargers and Phillip Rivers and the Giants. So 14 minutes go by, drip, drip, drip. And at the end of it, the trade gets completed. Ben's not going there. It was like a big balloon that the wind came out of. And of course, he ended up going to Pittsburgh, which was a marriage made in heaven.
When you look at that Mahomes draft and for him to burst on the scene and have so much success, how much do you think the Chiefs going and getting Patrick Mahomes and other teams like our hometown Cardinals not going and getting Patrick Mahomes, how much do you think that particular pick changed, I would almost say, history in the NFL?
Well, it does change history. I mean, the problem that teams had was they saw Patrick Mahomes in college, who was with a team where the defense gave up 50 points every game. And if he hadn't tried to score every single drive and taken chances, it would have been no way they ever would have won anything. So they didn't project him beyond that to see that that he could take a 3, 5, 7-step drop, that he was deadly accurate and the rest of it. But football today is all predicated on the presence of a franchise quarterback. And any team that aspires to go to the playoffs and the Super Bowl must have that player who you can win because of rather than with build around for 10 to 12 years. And importantly, in critical times, he's thrown a couple interceptions, the crowd's booing, the game's coming to the end, can compartmentalize, adopt a quiet mind, and elevate their level of play to take a team to and through victory. Very difficult to find, very difficult to develop, and if you have one, you better keep them.
How will you be spending this draft day? What will your range of emotions be like?
I'll probably be at an athlete's home, because as much an honor as it is to go to Las Vegas, being in their own home watching the draft allows someone to have every coach, every pastor, every second cousin. So sometimes when you see a scene, especially in the first round, where you're just seeing parents and the player, what you're not seeing are the other 100 people who are right behind that tableau. And so it's exciting. It's great to be in Las Vegas or wherever the draft is, but there's only like 6 or 7 people per table, and the hot lights are on. So if a player happens to go in that green room later than what they thought, it's about to become ESPN's case of a plummeting draft pick. So there's some advantages to being home, and those draft parties have been sponsored in many cases. So Mahomes had one that was sponsored by a card company.
When you show up at a draft party, really any NFL function, what do people say to you?
You know,
besides what's the quote?
Besides, show me the
money.
Right. So I get that every time I'm in an airport or out to dinner. But they're obviously concerned with how high they'll be drafted. So the key is having relationships with franchises where they'll talk honestly to you. Now, let me tell you, the spin that teams put on publicly is completely misleading, because no one wants to telegraph their draft plans and intentions where it can be read by another team. So that there's generalized amnesty for truth telling for NFL personnel during this period. Matter of fact, if a general manager died and went to heaven and he was talking to St. Peter, and St. Peter said, "What's the most egregious sin you committed your entire life?" And he said, "Well, I misled people about who we were going to take in the NFL draft." St. Peter would say, "Come right in."
I think you're forgiven by the fan base as well. I
Exactly.
get it. That doesn't stop us from asking the tough questions here in the media,
Right.
and trying to get an answer. Who are some of the guys that we're going to learn about that you're kind of shepherding here? And I mean, will you be in one athlete's home, multiple athletes' homes?
It depends. It depends how time works out. There was a year where we had Tua Tagovailoa, and I went to a big draft party for him in Alabama, and then we happened to have a plane with us, and it went to Miami, where Jerry Jeudy was having his draft night. So we hit 2 and 1, but generally it's a little harder, and you have to project. I'm not sure we have a first rounder this year, so my partner Chris Cabot's got a really good defensive lineman, Cameron Thomas from San Diego State, and another one, Sam Misra, has a really talented offensive lineman named Sean Ryan. I think that this is going to be basically a meat and potatoes draft. It's not going to be a glamour draft like we've had in the past, because the first pick figures to be like Aiden Hutchinson, the first defensive end. Then I think you're going to see either another defensive player, that Kevin Thibodeau, or you're going to see a bunch of offensive linemen go, maybe a defensive back, but it could be 10 or more picks until we get to the first quarterback. There's probably 2 that are going to go in the first round. No running backs, a lot of wide receivers, but it's basically going to be a meat and potatoes draft building infrastructure.
How much have you seen it change the way teams draft, even since you started? Was it with Steve Barkowski? Is that
It
right?
was 1975, and the draft was in January. So all they did at that point was they looked at player film from the season or from the career, and then the player might have played in an all-star game or two, and bam, then they drafted right then. And now we have every player in the country going to a training site for the month of January and part of February, training on speed and skill for the testables at the scouting combine. So they may play in all-star games, they go to scouting combine, they go back to campus for a pro scouting day, and then the best players fly off to franchises for and with all of that, with the millions of dollars spent on background scrutiny, what egregious sin did the guy commit when he was in grammar school? With all of that, they still have the same 40% of the first round either underperform or be out of football in 5 years.
Incredible. You mentioned the franchise quarterback earlier, and I want to circle back to that. Obviously, the Kyler story is big here. So how much do you think the price has gone up for a franchise quarterback, even with Deshaun Watson's deal from now on? How much more of a premium has been placed on it just this offseason?
So the very first time that players in football are actually making the same or more than players in basketball and baseball, and at that one position. So we probably started off with Mahomes, which was 450 million or 75, depending on the way you look at it, but 45 to $50 million range. And then that's where Deshaun Watson is. And each new signing will build on the signing of the quarterback before. So the market gets set by comparables. So the argument is, who are you like? Are you a starter? Have you taken your team to the playoffs? Have you been to the Pro Bowl? In other words, all the comparability. And if you find someone to compare your client with, then it keeps building and building and building. So who thought we'd have a $50 million quarterback, but the market will go up from there.
Are there some Pat Mahomes and Tom Brady's in this year's draft?
Well, you have Malik Willis from Liberty, who I think eventually will be a good quarterback. There's Kenny Pickett from Pitt. And I think those two quarterbacks might be the first two picked, and maybe the only ones in the first round. That position gets pushed up because the need is so great. So if Pickett or Willis are equivalent to a position player, they'll probably be picked first. So there's probably those two. There's Matt Corral from Mississippi or Mississippi State. There are other quarterbacks, but no, it's not like a year that has quarterback after quarterback at the top of the first round. Last year was a run on quarterbacks, and so you don't have the equivalent players there.
And it seems like after the draft this time of year, I always see Jerry MaGuire on the higher cable channels. Do you notice that? What was it? What's, as you look, what is it, 20 something years later,
25.
The power of that movie, how much do you think it still holds up?
The amazing thing is I get people calling me pretty much every week saying they saw it somewhere. So it just runs and runs. Thank God for the residuals.
Why do you think Arizona was the right spot for that?
It had a great stadium, practice facility, and the Bidwells were smart enough to understand branding, and they're in time when the most popular movies of all time goes down, and it's Cardinals.
Were there any lines from that movie besides "Show Me the Money" that people come up and, because you in the process, didn't you meet Rod Tidwell at the draft? I'm trying to remember the exact spot. But any other lines?
Yeah, Matt Dan. No, they come up and they say, "Help me, help you."
That's it.
You had me at hello. The human head weighs 3 zillion pounds. And, but all of those things. I mean, Cameron Crowe, the director, followed me around for a year and a half, and went everywhere I went. And I told him lots of stories, and we'll leave it there.
Awesome. Did that kid ever pan out, by the way, at the end of the movie? Did you have your eye on him?
Yeah, I really wanted the little kid, Dorsey's son, in there, because I thought he, forget the players. I thought he would have been a definite upgrade in our agency.
Awesome. And just last question for you, to have your story and go through what you've been through, and you're back at it. It seems like you're busier than ever. What is your message for people out there as they go through their own journey?
Well, if you're struggling with alcohol or any addicted substance, and you're confused and depressed and hopeless, just know there's help out there. And I worked a 12-step program with a unique fellowship, and there are people just waiting to help you. So try and see the light at the end of the tunnel. Try and have an epiphany where you understand that proportionality-wise, you're not a starving peasant in Darfur. You're not sitting in Ukraine under bombing. You probably don't have cancer or anything. So you've got light at the end of the tunnel. And, it's been 12 years for me, and life can get much happier.
The Extra Point Podcast is a production of 3TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.